Hello and welcome again, everybody. My name's Sage, and I am here to talk to you guys about tabletop role-playing games. I had a design, I had a topic in mind, but I realized that it didn't really formulate any conversation like I thought it would. So I'm gonna kind of lump it into something else that's I think kind of important to talk about. So I want to talk about house rules, Rule Zero. And everybody talks about house rules, but I do think that there's some things that need to be said about house ruling that a lot of people don't really talk about as much. But what kind of sparked it off and where I thought from was I want to talk just real quickly about what's called Ivory Tower game design. So when it comes down to like role playing games, I think that there's like these Ivory Tower games and then there's beer and pretzel games. And beer and pretzel games are what most of us want to play. We want to play a game that you sit around, you drink Mountain Dew, you eat pizza, you tell Monty Python or Skyrim or Skibbity Toilet jokes, whatever the fuck you kids today make jokes about. And you bap orcs with sharp bits of metal. You blow up spaceships with death rays because we live very real, very stressful lives. You know, I work between 45 and 55 hours a week, 4 to 5 days a week. I drive half an hour back from work, another hour every day taken up. You know, I get kids ready for school. I bring home and help them do homework. I do the laundry because I do laundry in the house. You know, I do the dishes in the house. Usually, me and my wife generally split the dishes. I'm making kids breakfast. I'm going out spending time like that's what I do. That's my life. Like the amount of time I get in a week to like really just fucking not function as an adult. It's very little. It's like a couple hours a week. I want to get together. I want to sit down and I want to, crush zombies with, magic weapons. That's what I'm after in a game. And what really sparked this was a podcast I don't mention because the person who runs it's kind of scummy. I don't particularly care for them, but they had a guest on. They were talking about house ruling games, and the individual made a comment about how players will house rule games just to get the game going, just to get the game going. They don't really consider what that house rule means in the long term, both mechanically and morally or philosophically. I can't remember the exact something of that nature. And that really struck me because that is everything wrong with Ivory Tower game design. You know, you guys, you're game designers, and I get it, so you do for a full time living, and that's fine. But you're not really living in the same reality that me and my players and 99% of players are. And if you want to make something that's an experience, something like Numenon or Continuum or that weird ass fairy White Wolf game, I don't remember what it was called. And that's fine. That's okay. There's certainly space in the world for those games. I actually really like Jason Morningstar's Fiasco. I think Fiasco is a fun little experience. I wouldn't want to play it every week, and I certainly, it's fun to play, and I'd like to play it again. But realistically, I would just rather in my weekend play Dungeons and Dragons. I would rather play Shadowrun. I would rather play, Palladium. Hell, I'd even rather play Powered by the Apocalypse, if we're being completely honest, than Fiasco 99% of the time. Um, I'd rather play Fate or might even rather play Storyteller, like Exalted or Scion if I was gonna pick. I would pick one of those two just because the worlds are far more in fun than Vampire the Masquerade. To me. Obviously VTM is very popular, but it just doesn't strike me. And it just really, really was I just remember thinking, hey, you said the quiet part loud, like maybe we just want to get on with the game. Maybe we just want to continue telling the little story with our dumb little, characters that we wanted to tell were. And that really hit me because it's like, you're not my mom, and I'm not writing a book report. I don't really care what you're trying to teach me. But one of the things that really got me was this idea that we don't understand what it means mechanically. And you're right. You're like, well, they're not really coming at it from a game designer's perspective. And you're right. We're not. We're coming at it from people who want to have fun perspective. And that's really what house ruling is about. It is about making the game more fun for us. For example, when I have players roll D&D characters, Pathfinder First Edition had something called Heroic, wherein when you roll your stats, you roll 2d6 plus 6, granting you between 6 and 18, and it gives you just a very flat floor. Boom. You cannot go lower than 8 on this dice roll, and it pushes up. Your averages are closer to 13, 14 than they are 10 or 11, or even 12, 13, closer to 13, 14. So characters tend to be a little stronger. Or the one of the DMs I play with, one of the guys who DMs and I play with him, he 46 drop lowest, but reroll ones, which means the lowest that you could possibly get is a 6. If you roll 2, 2, 2, 2, that's so rare. If you roll 5, 5, 4, 1, you reroll that 1, you might get another 5. You might get a 6. Bringing your number from a 14 to a 15 or 16. You might not. You might only get a 2. But it still pushes that number up. So you characters play slightly more heroic characters. And that's just house rules made to push the power level up a little bit, because at a time, I think that there's something to be said about the kind of playing the big damned heroes. And certainly 5th edition just kind of has that naturally anyway with its power scaling. Just classes tend to be stronger. 5th, I guess 5.5 makes it even more. But there's also something to be said about that being like making the game harder to DM, because players are so strong now. They have so much power in their hands that it makes balancing encounters harder, and I absolutely get that. But as D&D players, you kind of gotta just fuck with the rules a little bit in order to really understand how that stuff works. We can't be told that there's an experience we're not having, because you just kind of got to get in there and do it. You just kind of got to get your hands dirty and play. And there's actually kind of an interesting video game example of this, which is Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and Knuckles. So, Sonic the Hedgehog 3, and platformers tend to be just kind of fast-paced mazes. You start, finish, and then these paths with obstacles in between. And you give start to finish and clear the obstacles. I guess they're more like obstacle courses. They're just like these obstacle courses where you have certain tools, certain actions you can take to try and pass these obstacles. So if you plug Sonic and Knuckles, and you plug Sonic the Hedgehog 3 into it, you can play as Knuckles. And Knuckles he can't jump as high, but he can climb walls, he can glide, he can destroy certain objects. And it can kind of give you an appreciation of the level design of these things with Sonic the Hedgehog's skill set in mind. Because there are huge sections that you can just bypass. And I'm sure that's on purpose. That's absolutely a design and that's a feature, not a bug. You're supposed to be able to do that. It's part of the... But if you really sit down and analyze, you can see the way that this game was designed with Sonic the Hedgehog's speed, jumping, ball in mind, and not Knuckles' gliding and wall climbing. And so it's almost the devs giving you a look into house rules. And of course, modern gaming, modding, just so much modding of Skyrim and all this stuff, and it kind of creates you want to start to understand why things were designed the way they were designed. And people designing games aren't perfect. They're not, divine beings high on that should never be questioned, because just like you and I, they're human. So their designs aren't perfect. We've house ruled almost every game we play, because um it's just, we're trying to make, and not every group plays the same. Some groups want that kind of tension where every fight feels like their last. That's like the whole soul of the OSR. And some groups want to feel like big damn heroes who can, cut through waves of enemies and just have the one-on-one fight with the boss, like an anime character, like you're playing a One Piece style, where you punch your way through 55 mooks, and then you fight a boss. And that certainly is an acceptable way to play too. And even though both of those can be facilitated in Dungeons and Dragons game, they both require different things. Like maybe in the first example of wanting players to feel a little weaker, you don't get max hit points at first level. You roll for hit points at first level. You roll that d10, you roll that d8, and if you roll a 1, you got 1 plus constitution modifier, 1 plus 2, 1 plus 3 hit points, 4 hit points. Man, you better you better be playing smart, and you better be playing lucky. And that's what some people want, and it very caters to the gaming experience for each individual person. And so and one of the biggest things I have about house rules is, I think that if you incorporate a house rule, everyone who plays Dungeons and Dragons, everyone who plays tabletop gaming, should understand a certain social contract, and that is, if these house rules are a problem, we can change them back or modify them even more, because we're all just trying to have fun in this game. We're all just trying to enjoy this pastime that we all have, and part of that is going to be playing with the way these things work. I was actually just listening to one of our Stanley Parable videos from a while ago, and I and Anna and Caleb were talking about stabs in Dungeons and Dragons and how to modify it to make it kind of different than just a big club. And just listening to us kind of brain storm how staff fighting works, and even one-handed staff fighting. Like, is one-handed staff fighting even a viable option? I've seen a couple of people do some one-handed staff fighting. Still say not really. Not the point. But certainly, I could see somebody wanting to house rule. Just no, a staff's a two-handed weapon. You're not one-handing a staff. But also saying, well, it's a fantasy game. It's not really designed to mimic a reality. So, certainly every table is going to want to be a little different. And I think if you come across a problem rule in the game, Rule 0 absolutely should apply. The DM should be able to just make a ruling, and everybody at the table kind of accepts it. That's never happened. I've never even been one to do that, because every time a DM's made a house rule, I've always questioned, just because that's just how I am. And certainly it's not the most admirable trait that I have, of being like, wait. But if you make this house rule, then XYZ, and it certainly doesn't help the whole thing of creating a cohesive game flow. I admit it, it's not my best trait, and it's something I probably need to work on a lot more than I maybe do. Yeah, so obviously any one of us can have toxic moments as players, and one of mine is that I argue with DMs about rulings. Not even just rulings, just, hey, what is this house, if we make this house rule, what does that imply for the future? But at the same time, I really should just accept the DM's ruling and go on with it, because once again, we all want to play. We're all just here to play this game, right? We're all just here to have fun. We all want to play the game. And and this is something that even games tell you that gets so ignored, so I'm just going to reiterate it here. After the house ruling's been made and the session's over, I think that there should absolutely be an open discussion, and certainly with things like discords and instant messenger groups and text groups, that chat groups, that absolutely this discussion is something that we had away from the table, where people can just kind of pop in and out as needed. They can put their input in when they have the time to put input in. um, Even if you just want to take half an hour before the next session and do it, there should be a discussion. Questions like, hey, I made this ruling last week. Does anybody have any objections to this ruling? And then you could kind of hash it out there and not at the table when everybody just wants to go to the next room and, smash a zombie with a mace. So, I mean, yeah, okay. And like I said, it's something it's something I absolutely need to work on. And it is because I'm so fascinated with game design that I do question all of it. But anyway, so that's it. And then house rules even I think are nice because so there's a game I am desperate to try. Give me 1 minute. I gotta go take care of something. Hey, what are you doing? Get out of there. Get out of there. Get out of there, asshole. I am so sorry about that. One of the cats decided they were going to try to go and dig into some food that they weren't even going to eat. They're like had a bag of muffins they were trying to dig open. Like, you won't even eat the muffins. You just open the bag and ruin a bag of muffins. Cats. Kittens. They're little kittens. But anyway, where was I? Oh yeah. But so like we have these, the house rules that we incorporate, and so there's a game I want to try. I really really want to try. It's the second edition of Blue Rose. I think that the world building looks really good. I think it's got an interesting system. But I'm immediately house ruling two things. There's one that it's even a house rule they almost suggest, where you have a background and your national background gives you a list of like 6 skills that you can choose from to get proficiency in. And the games are like, well, even if you're from this nation, but maybe your character's from the Royal Guard, so it just make more sense for him to take this skill instead of one of the 5. You should be like, so then what does it matter? You should just pick a skill based on your character's background. So just one free skill pick, just how it is. And then the other one, and it's something I so want to house rule more in games. And I do understand it a lot from like Dungeons and Dragons perspective, because I think that they have kind of cemented this weapon idea of, gaming, and I think it needs changed. But there's like, it's like, okay, so if you choose to be an adept, which is a spellcaster, wizard, sorcerer, priest, whatever, you can pick, you get proficient with this 2 weapons. You're proficient with staves and knives. And I'm like, okay, but what if I want to be a wizard with a spear? What if I want to be a wizard with no spellcaster should ever be allowed to use anything but a knife and a staff. And this idea came from Palladium, and it created such an amazing, my Palladium campaign, and it created such an amazing idea in my head, such a unique character design, that I think that games like Dungeons and Dragons and even Blue Rose, a lot of these games are so limited. So in Palladium, classes generally don't have weapon proficiencies they start with. They start with like, Wizard starts with a weapon proficiency. You pick a weapon proficiency and that's your weapon proficiency. Fighters might get 5 or 6 weapon proficiencies. A wizard gets 1. And my friend Josh, kind of the main guy on this channel, decided he was going to pick spear for his wizard. And it created this character design where he's like a wizard. He's got his wizard staff, with the crystal in the end. But his crystal, instead of being like a sphere or like a diamond, it's like this jagged number. And it's like, okay, so I've got my magic staff, but the magic crystal, because it's magic crystal, it's hardened. Just as part of the flavor of the campaign we made, decided it was hardened. So he's just got his normal staff. It just happens that his magic crystal on the end of his magic staff is really sharp, and it allows him to use it as a spear because the crystal won't break because it's an enchanted crystal. And so it's created this very, just by that one rule, by not forcing him to pick staff or knife, it created this very unique character design. And I think that more games should kind of incorporate that idea. It might require some reason, but the game I've been designing, the fantasy heartbreaker I've been designing, I think I'm going to change how I'm going to make it work. And I think this might be something D&D could incorporate. And I think one of the old editions did. Like one of the 14 versions of first edition did, where your character class determines melee damage and not your weapon. So it's not the fact that you have a longsword that does 1d8 damage, it's the fact that you're an elf or a ranger or a cleric, whatever, that deals 1d8 damage, not the weapon you're wielding. So like a barbarian and a fighter might do a d12 damage because that's what barbarians and fighters do. They hit stuff. Paladin might do a blood hunter, and a blood hunter might do a d10 because they are fighters, but they have that magic, so they're not as dedicated to smashing stuff as a fighter. And I'm probably going to get more into that when I talk about melees and magics in games, and especially in Dungeons and Dragons, because melee and magic is such a mess in D&D. They are so unbalanced against each other. And it's crazy. But something like that, and it would create something cool and allow your wizard to walk around with a greatsword. And even if your fighter still had a knife, the fighter would still be more dangerous, and you would just make the argument that he's so dangerous because that wizard's just kind of taking that big old sword and being like, because he's not really trained in it the way the fighter is. Because, he spent 15 years learning chants and how to wave his hand in order to, make a fire appear, where that fighter spent those 15 years with that knife learning the quickest, most accurate way to use it, where to cut on the opponent to make it as deadly as possible, being like boom, boom, 2 hits to the neck, which is might even do more than just kind of an awkward tag with a greatsword. You pop, 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 pop. And, you make the argument of it being, well, that's like 5 or 6 hits. Or you call it one hit and, because that tap, 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 tap's one continuous motion. We're not playing Final Fantasy Tactics. Characters don't walk into a square, go, bonk, and then that's not an imaginative way to enter this fantasy world of imagination. So it's like, I don't know, but this has just been kind of all over the place. But I did really want to just a lot of touch on this Ivory Tower game design and the way that a lot of the people I've heard speak on game design who come from this school of thought, and the way they almost look down on the average player, the people who you should be wanting to buy your game, who you should be wanting to entice, and I even understand, you might have a something to teach, Blue Rose is very, very, the world of, especially the main world, is a very progressive world, the natural language of Alden doesn't have gender pronouns, because gender means nothing, because in a world where you can cast a spell and alter your physical attributes, including gender, what does sex and gender mean in a world where I can go boop and am a woman, or boop and am intersex, and boop and I am now, genderless? What does gender mean in a world like that? So there is something there about how we look at our relationship with gender, but it's tied into a functional game that looks like it would be fun in a world that looks kind of fun. And I actually have a really interesting story I want to tell in this world. So there you have messages here, you can I don't want to say teach because teach sounds kind of condescending, but you can, you know, create this world where players consider these things and not be an asshole. Like, I don't know what else to tell you. It's just a very, to call everyone who plays Dungeons and Dragons racist because Dungeons and Dragons is predicated on going out and teaching savages. I mean, not really. Like, maybe a little bit, and maybe some games, but it's more just a cathartic way to kind of spend your time. And certainly, if you're uncomfortable with the way orcs are portrayed, there's nothing stopping you from changing the way the orcs are portrayed. I hate drow elves. I have found for long periods of time, even before this was the discussion, drow elves to be very uncomfortable. That the light skinned, the fair skinned, blonde haired elves are civilized and wise and intelligent, and the dark skinned elves are these underground spider worshipping sociopaths who are all evil. Every single dark skinned elf is evil, and I'm like, that's a that's a really uncomfortable thing. And I've even never particularly cared that a creature with intelligence is exclusively good and evil, but I also get that you need faceless monsters to fight in these kind of games because players don't want to have to sit down and have long discussions about, you know, things like that. Some players just want to smack monsters with a pointed stick, and they're undead, and there are, but fighting nothing but zombies gets boring very quickly. So I do see the need of evil creatures, but if something about the way they're portrayed bothers you, by all means, discuss it with your group. Like, have that conversation with the guys. Be like, hey guys, like the way orcs are portrayed feel very coded to me, and they make me, and I feel very uncomfortable in this space. Can we either not fight orcs or change enough about them I no longer feel they are coded to the execution of a certain population? Because those are absolutely valid conversations to have within the game space, that there are elements within these game spaces, and I think some, whether intentional or not, and I think often unintentional, can lead to players feeling uncomfortable. And certainly I don't like the red button or the stop or hand signals, because if your group isn't comfortable enough to just say, hey guys, I don't want all drow elves to be evil. I don't feel comfortable with drow elves being these universally evil monsters. You're not going to be comfortable getting in front of everybody and tapping a card on the table. Safety tools are important, and I do think that safety tools are something that really need to be incorporated into the space. But if you're in a group of people and you don't feel comfortable enough to just be like, guys, can we not like execute ever? Can we not do this? You're probably not going to be comfortable enough to make a big showy gesture that in and of itself feels kind of, I mean, I don't know the word. It's hard to describe, but it feels just very like attention grabby, being like, ahem, I have to make a big show of tapping this card on the center of the table. So I don't know. I have been kind of thinking of ways to incorporate that safety card, that red card. Saying like, hey, I don't, walking into a town and seeing, the undead army, the Lich King's army, and what he's done to the population, and showing like the way that they've ritualistically sacrificed ritually sacrificed kids, and for you to be like, I don't really want to hear you describe children being, what do they call it? Blood Eagle? Is that thing that the Vikings, where they spoiled them? Like, I don't really feel comfortable with this. A way to red card that without being, because like I said, if it was my group of people and that was something that would happen, I would be like, all right, can we just skip over this bit? And the people I play with generally would, okay, because like we even had one of the people I played with, she was DMing a Chris Estrad. It's on hiatus for now. I'd like to get back to it, but she's DMing a Chris Estrad campaign, and she opened up being like, hey, this is a horror campaign. You're probably gonna see some, dark stuff. Are there any red flags? And, really wasn't, just because our groups kind of open it up enough that we don't really, like, there really isn't a lot you're going to do that bothers me. But, there's an important conversation to be had there. But then like, if I do have something I'm going to be uncomfortable with, most of them already know. Like, I'm personally not real big on graphic displays of violence against children. That is kind of like a no-go zone for me. Like, it's like, oh, there's dead children. And I don't like it, but okay, fine. But if you're going to, like, graphically describe what happened to these kids, be like, hey, I'm not super comfortable with this. But they also already kind of know that about me, because we're comfortable enough that we've kind of shared our red flags, our no-go zones. And even if they haven't, why would they, in the middle of this game where all eyes are on them? Text messages, maybe like sending a text, but once again, if you're not really comfortable enough, you get quiet, you send a text, and then all of a sudden the DM just is like, oh, okay, we're just going to skip over that. It's still very attention calling to you. And so if you're playing over something like one of those digital, like, what is it? Roll20, where there's a lot more anonymity to send a DM to the DM, as it were, a direct message to the dungeon master. That works a lot better, and I really do think that's one of the huge advantages of playing in a space like that. I'm not super fond of playing over something like Roll20, because I think that Dungeons and Dragons is kind of a personal game, and it's very unique in that you sit at a table and play, but I also understand that it's just not an option for everybody. Like I said, personal preference, I'd rather play in person than over something like a Roll20, but I also see the usage of that space. And certainly it allows you to just be like, send a DM the message like, hey, like, I don't really feel comfortable with this. I'm really super uncomfortable with the way you have portrayed the orcs as African coded, or, indigenous coded, or what have you. Like, it allows you to kind of have that conversation where you're not immediately going to get judged, where the guy sitting across from the table is not immediately going to argue with you about your feeling of uncomfortableness. And so it's like, okay, like, I do think those are useful tools. I kind of trying to figure out a way to make those tools into my tabletop role playing game better, but I haven't thought of it yet. But anyway, I guess I've gone on about random shit for long enough. But yeah, so just, I guess, keep playing, and let's keep making this hobby better for everyone. Alright, I will see you next time.